All right, so welcome to the deep dive, everyone. You know the name Adolf Hitler, obviously. You know World War II, the Holocaust,
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, it's pretty well trodden ground at this point.
Exactly. So today, we thought we would try something a little different for you. Like, what if we went beyond the big picture stuff and took a look at some of the, I guess you could call them dark corners of Hitler's personal life?
Yeah. I mean, everybody knows the broad strokes, but what about the details,
Yeah.
right? Like, what about his relationships, his weird obsessions, the things that, might actually help us understand what made him tick?
Yeah, exactly. So we got our hands on this really fascinating text. It's called Adolf Hitler's Secret Relationships and Obsessions. And, well, it goes deep.
Deep dive material for sure.
Right. So that's what we were doing today, a deep dive into some of these hidden aspects of Hitler. You know, the obsessions, the desires, the things that really, really shaped who he was.
I think for me, what jumped out right away was the sheer intensity
Yeah.
of Hitler's need for control. And I mean, we all know he was a dictator, but this went way beyond politics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was in
It
everything.
was like his entire life was about controlling every single detail, every relationship, everything. Even his private world was totally dominated by this need. And I think the most obvious example of that is the cult of personality he built around himself.
The whole infallible Führer thing, yeah, that was insane. So for you listening, basically, Hitler created this image of himself as like this all-knowing, all-powerful leader, and he really pushed this image hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, propaganda was everywhere. But the thing is, this wasn't just about controlling a nation. This need for control was deeply personal, too. I mean, look at his relationship with Eva Braun, for example.
Right. I mean, here you have this woman who was his long-term partner. She was with him for years, but she was completely hidden from public view. It's almost like he wanted to keep her existence a secret.
And that makes you wonder, right? Like, what was that about? Was it part of this bigger need to control his image, to control the narrative? Or was it something deeper? Was it about some sort of personal insecurity that he was trying to mask by being so controlling, even in his personal relationships?
It's a good question. And the text really dives into how much he dictated the terms of their relationship. I mean, she lived separately. She had to be incredibly loyal. She couldn't question anything.
Talk about a toxic relationship. And this went on for years, almost right up until the end. And, it wasn't just Eva Braun either.
Hmm.
Once you start looking at his other relationships, you see this pattern of secrecy and, well, sometimes pretty strange connections, like with her younger sister, Gretel Braun,
Oh, yeah, Gretel. The text mentions that there were rumors about her being involved with some high-ranking Nazi officials, like romantically involved.
which, it just adds to this whole weird, secretive world around Hitler and his inner circle. So this is a big question for me and for you listening too. Why all the secrecy?
Right, like was it all just calculated? Part of some grand political strategy to maintain a certain image, to make him seem like this totally devoted leader who had no time for personal stuff?
Or was it something else entirely?
Yeah.
Maybe a deeper insecurity, a fear of showing any kind of weakness?
You know, and I think the text leans more towards the calculated image thing. Like he wanted to be seen as this detached, all-powerful figure.
But then you have his whole thing about women and the Aryan ideal. Like, you can't really call him detached, can you?
No, no, not at all. And that's where it gets even more complicated, right? Because on the one hand, you have these relationships, but on the other hand, he was basically saying that women were only really valuable as producers of racially pure children.
Like, they were just baby factories.
Yeah, it's really messed up. And it shows that even within these supposedly romantic relationships, there was this deeply ingrained misogyny.
Like, women weren't really people to him. They were just tools for achieving his twisted vision of a perfect Aryan society.
Yes.
Exactly. So it makes you think about how transactional those relationships really were. Like, maybe they were just a way for him to get what he wanted without ever really challenging his messed up worldview.
Now, we have to talk about Gelly Robal.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where things get really, really dark. And for you listening, Jelly was Hitler's half-niece. And, well, the text describes it as an infatuation, a pretty intense one.
Yeah, but calling it an infatuation almost feels like an understatement, doesn't it?
Totally. So she lived with him, and he was incredibly controlling. Like, he isolated her from her friends and family, controlled what she did, who she saw. It was really bad.
Yeah, the level of control he had over her was absolutely insane. He was suffocating her, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it all points to this really, really unhealthy dynamic. And then, well, she committed suicide in 1931.
Which, you know, the text suggests that this had a huge impact on Hitler. It was a major turning point for him, and not in a good way.
No, not at all. I mean, think about it. This was a personal tragedy, a huge one. And it happened in the context of this incredibly controlling relationship. So it's not surprising that it might have made his paranoia worse.
And his need for control.
Exactly. And I think understanding that is crucial for understanding his later actions. It adds this whole other layer to his psychology,
Yeah.
to how he saw the world, how he dealt with people, everything.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the dark stuff, but the text also talks about something else that Hitler was obsessed with: art and culture.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was a huge fan of classical art and architecture. Like, obsessed is the right word.
And it wasn't just a hobby for him, it was a big part of his worldview. He saw art as this reflection of racial purity and national identity.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting because it's all tied into his whole Nazi ideology. Like, he had this very specific idea of what Aryan art should be. It had to be traditional, heroic, all that.
And anything that didn't fit that mold, like modern art, was immediately labeled degenerate. And he wasn't just talking about it either. He actively tried to suppress it, to destroy it. Like, remember that whole degenerate art exhibition they put on?
Yeah, that was wild. I mean, they literally gathered up all this art that they didn't like and put it on display to mock it.
And for you listening, this wasn't just about personal taste. It was a whole propaganda campaign. They wanted to demonize anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of art. And it's even more interesting when you consider that Hitler himself wanted to be an artist. Like, he actually applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna twice.
And got rejected both times.
Yeah.
A lot of historians think that rejection had a huge impact on him.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, talk about a blow to the ego. I mean, this was Hitler, right?
Yeah.
He thought he was destined for greatness.
And then he gets rejected by the art world. So yeah, it makes sense that he would hold a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
And some people even think that rejection fueled his obsession with reshaping German culture. Like, he wanted to create this whole new system where his kind of art was the only acceptable kind.
And it's scary to think about, but it's almost like he took that personal rejection and turned it into a national vendetta. Like, you rejected me, so now I'm going to reject everything you stand for.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. And speaking of messed up, we also have to talk about Hitler's fascination with the occult and the supernatural.
Right. Now, this is where it gets really weird. I mean, there's a lot of speculation out there about how much Hitler was actually into this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that people love to talk about.
But the text makes it pretty clear that Hitler genuinely believed in a mystical destiny for the Aryan race.
Yeah.
Like, he thought they were chosen people or something.
Yeah, and this whole idea really shaped his plans for building an empire. It wasn't just about politics and military power. It was about something way more mystical and, honestly, kind of crazy.
And one specific group that gets mentioned is the Thule Society. This was a German occult group, and they were super nationalistic and anti-Semitic. And, well, Hitler had connections to them even before he came to power.
Yeah, and some of the members were actually pretty influential in the early Nazi party. They helped shape the ideology, the whole structure of the party. So it shows you that there was this really weird mix of stuff going on in early Nazi thought.
Like, it wasn't just about politics. It was about this strange blend of extreme nationalism, racism, and occult beliefs. And then, of course, you have the Spear of Destiny.
Ah, the Spear of Destiny. Now that's a good story.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, this was a legendary relic, like King Arthur stuff.
And Hitler was convinced that if he could get his hands on it, it would give him, like, divine power. I mean, he was obsessed with it.
Right. Yeah, and it really shows you how deep this whole mystical worldview ran with him. Like, he wasn't just trying to win a war. He thought he was on some kind of divine mission.
Which is, pretty terrifying when you think about it. So, okay, let's talk about how Hitler dealt with the other Nazi leaders, because this is where you really see his paranoia and his need for control in action.
Oh, yeah, his relationships with the other top Nazis were a total mess. Super secretive, manipulative, full of distrust.
It was like a constant power struggle.
Yeah, and the text makes it clear that he was always trying to consolidate his own power. He didn't want anyone else getting too strong, and he was constantly creating this atmosphere of fear.
Like, nobody was safe, not even the people who seemed to be his closest allies. Take Heinrich Himmler, for example, the head of the SS.
Right. So at first they seemed to be on the same page. Like, they had this mutual respect. They shared a lot of the same beliefs. But as the war went on and things started to go badly for Germany, Hitler's paranoia went through the roof.
And he even started to distrust Himmler. Like, he thought Himmler was plotting against him. And then, well, Himmler started negotiating with the Allies in secret.
Which, to Hitler, that was the ultimate betrayal. And it really shows you how unstable the whole Nazi leadership structure was. Like, even people who seemed the most loyal were always walking on eggshells.
And then there's Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister. He was always seen as the super loyal follower, like Hitler's right-hand man.
But the text suggests that it was more complicated than that. Like, Goebbels definitely had his own ambitions. And there were times when he clashed with Hitler.
Yeah, so it wasn't just a simple master-servant relationship. There was definitely some rivalry there, and maybe even some competition for influence.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's important to understand about how Hitler operated. He liked to keep people off balance. He wanted them competing with each other so that nobody got too powerful.
And then there's the really strange case of Rudolf Hess, his deputy who flew to Scotland by himself to try to negotiate peace with the British.
Yeah. That was one of the weirdest things that happened during the whole war.
Totally out of the blue. And Hitler was furious. I mean, he saw it as a huge betrayal. And he had Hess imprisoned for the rest of his life.
Which really shows you how much control Hitler wanted. Like, he couldn't even handle the idea of someone else trying to take initiative, even if they thought they were helping.
Yeah, it was his way or the highway.
Hmm.
And speaking of control, we also have to talk about Hitler's obsession with death. I mean, this became a huge thing for him, especially as the war was coming to an end.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear that he was increasingly fixated on it. Like, it was always on his mind.
And in the end, he chose suicide rather than facing defeat.
Which, is incredibly telling. It shows you how much he couldn't handle failure. And it was almost like a final act of defiance.
Like he was going to die on his own terms. He wasn't going to let anyone else control his fate. And the text connects this obsession with death to his desire for control in general. Like he wanted to control everything, even his own death.
And it's really disturbing. But the text also makes this connection between his obsession with death and the Holocaust. Like, they're saying that the Holocaust was actually a tool for him to exert control.
Yeah, like it was a way for him to eliminate entire groups of people that he saw as threats to his vision of a perfect Aryan society. And it's a really, really chilling thought.
It is. And I think it's one of the most important things to take away from all of this.
Mhm.
Like, when you look at all these personal details, all these obsessions, it gives you a much deeper understanding of how Hitler's dictatorship worked. It wasn't just about politics and ideology.
It was about his psychology, about who he was as a person. And that's what made him so dangerous.
Right. I mean, his need for control, his weird relationships, his obsession with art, the occult, death, it was all connected. It was all part of the same package.
And that package led to some of the worst atrocities in human history. So it really makes you think about how important it is to understand the psychology of leaders, like what makes them tick, what motivates them, because it can have huge consequences for the whole world.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, and for those of you listening, I think the big question to ask yourselves is this. What does all of this tell us about the connection between someone's personal psychology and the big events that shape history? Like, how much of what happened was because of who Hitler was as a person? And how can we use that knowledge to recognize similar patterns, maybe even in our own time? It's something we all need to think about.